Every day, $1 billion moves through the port of Vancouver. $1 billion moving every single day. Most people never realize. But here's the story mainstream media is not covering today. On July 16th, Canada launched a 100 billion gateway, Roberts Bank Terminal 2, a 3B berth superport near Delta, British Columbia. The United States was not in that announcement, not once mentioned. And the timing was not accidental, not even close to accidental. Just 15 days earlier, Trump said he wanted KUSMA to expire soon. Canada did not panic. Canada did not beg. Canada built west. The Gateway strategy represents Canada's most ambitious trade infrastructure move ever. Subscribe to Money Signals right now. This story gets much bigger. The Port of Vancouver already handles staggering volumes of global trade. It connects Canada to 170 global markets total. It handles 40% of Canada's trade in goods beyond North America. One in three non-US trade dollars flows through this single port. One in three from one port sitting on Canada's Pacific coast. Ottawa just announced it wants to dramatically expand what this port does. The anchor project is Roberts Bank Terminal 2, known as RBT2. Transport Minister Stephen McKinnon announced its referral to the Major Projects Office. That referral gives RBT2 fast-track status under the Building Canada Act. One regulatory window, national interest designation, and faster approvals all apply. The Vancouver Fraser Port Authority selected Terra Marine as construction partner July 13th. That selection followed a rigorous competitive process across three shortlisted teams. Terra Marine is a joint venture led by the giant Flatiron Datados firm. Van Ord, Acon, and Carlson Construction Group are also part of it. That competitive procurement officially started all the way back in July 225. Three teams were shortlisted in November 2025 before Terra Marine was selected. The contract includes a marine landmass and a 1,300-meter wharf structure. It also covers a widened causeway and an expanded tug basin. Financial close and early works are currently targeted for late 2027. Full land reclamation and construction work is scheduled to begin in 2028. Completion is targeted for early 2034, with terminal operations beginning thereafter. The contracts are signed. The team is named. This is real. Now here is where the 100 billion figure becomes truly staggering. RBT2 alone unlocks $100 billion in new annual trade capacity. It adds over $3 billion to Canada's GDP every single year. 17,000 ongoing supply chain jobs will be supported during operations. Container capacity at the Port of Vancouver increases by 50%. That 50% expansion adds 2.4 million annual TEUs, 50% more ships, 50% more cargo, 50% more throughput. That is not a minor upgrade. That is a structural economic transformation. But RBT2 is only one pillar of the broader gateway strategy announced. The second pillar covers bulk terminal expansion through land and infrastructure upgrades. The port hosts 29 major marine terminals across its vast operations. Grain, Podak, coal, petroleum, and forest products all flow through here. More Canadian potash means more fertilizer reaching farms across all of Asia. Expanding bulk capacity sends more prairie grain into hungry Asian markets. The third pillar is a dedicated rail infrastructure strategy for Pacific corridors. Most cargo reaching the Port of Vancouver arrives first by rail. Without rail investment, the entire Pacific supply chain risks serious congestion. Transport Canada and the Major Projects Office are jointly developing this strategy. The fourth pillar is environmental protection, running alongside every infrastructure investment. In May, Canada invested $258 million to protect coastal whales. Another $412 million renewed the Pacific Salmon Strategy Initiative. Canada is arguing it can build bigger while protecting the natural environment. 27 First Nations have provided consent and mutual benefits agreements for RBT2. That is a crucial number for a project on British Columbia's coastline. That consent represents years of negotiation and genuine partnership with Indigenous peoples. Indigenous consultation is already embedded into Tarara Marine's full construction planning process. Now zoom out and look at why this matters so much geopolitically. Prime Minister Mark Carney has one central economic goal above everything else. He wants to double Canadian exports to markets outside the United States, not by 10%, not modestly, double by the year 2035. The Port of Vancouver is the primary engine for achieving that goal. British Columbia is Canada's Pacific gateway, and Ottawa is betting everything here. The Indo-Pacific is growing at a pace that reshapes global economic gravity. Carney campaigned on sovereignty. This port strategy is that promise delivered. By 2040, it is projected to represent 50% of global GDP. Canada's biggest trade partners outside the US are Japan, Korea, and China. All of them sit across the Pacific Ocean directly from Vancouver. All accessible through a port Ottawa just fast-tracked and dramatically expanded. Japan alone takes nearly $18 billion in Canadian goods annually. South Korea and China combined represent tens of billions more in exports. None of those trade relationships require Donald Trump's signature on anything. None require a COSMA renewal. None depend on American goodwill at all. That is the strategic architecture Canada is quietly building beneath tariff noise. That makes the Indo-Pacific the single biggest economic prize available today. While analysts debate COSMA's survival, Ottawa is constructing the infrastructure to pivot. The Gateway Strategy is a full national trade doctrine, not just ports. A doctrine saying Canada must stop depending this heavily on Washington. The July 16th announcement came 15 days after the KSMA deadline passed. America officially declined to extend CUSMA on Canada Day, July 1st, 2026. Trump told reporters June 17th he sees CUSMA as possibly expiring immediately. He said, quote, "It will not stick around, it will be terminated." Canada's former chief negotiator, Steve Verhal, expected no deal before fall midterms. COSMA runs to 2036 under annual reviews, but the trajectory looks unstable. Canada cannot keep waiting for Washington to decide its economic fate alone. That uncertainty is powering every contract signed, every shovel, every planning decision, because Canada is done waiting for Washington to decide Canada's economic future. And that urgency is visible in more than just the port announcement. Ottawa is also reviewing Alberta's proposed West Coast oil pipeline simultaneously. That pipeline review was bundled directly into the Gateway Strategy announcement. Two different projects, one shared objective, reduce dependence on American markets. Alberta's pipeline would carry crude oil from the prairies to Pacific Tidewater. From there, Canadian energy reaches Japan, South Korea, China, and India directly. Alberta says construction could begin as early as September 2027 officially. Ottawa plans to decide on national interest designation by October 1st, 2026. That October deadline is just weeks away, and the pressure is enormous. Canada's experience with pipelines offers an honest lesson about timelines here. Ottawa bought the Trans Mountain pipeline system back in 2018 for billions. Delays and cost overruns pushed that expansion to roughly $34 billion. $34 billion for one pipeline that started at a fraction of that. So when Ottawa fast-tracks another energy project, skepticism is completely justified. But the political motivation this time is fundamentally different in nature. This is not just about building capacity. This is about building leverage. Canada wants the ability to sell its energy east, west, and globally. Not just south, not to one buyer who sets the price unilaterally. Right now, American buyers pay Canadian producers below global market prices. That price discount costs Canadian producers billions of dollars every single year. Getting crude to Pacific Tidewater means accessing Asian buyers paying global rates. The price gap between those two markets is called the WCS differential. That differential has historically cost Canada $10 to $30 per barrel. At 3 million barrels per day of production, that gap is enormous. Even a $10 improvement per barrel adds billions to Canadian revenues. This is real money leaving Canadian communities every single day right now. The Gateway Strategy and Pipeline Review together address that structural problem directly. Now, here is where the CUSMA deadline ties into all of this. The United States formally declined to extend CUSMA on July 1st, 2026. U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer made that position official on Canada Day. He confirmed the Trump administration does not want to extend the deal. But CUSMA does not die on July 1st. It runs until 2036. Those reviews give Washington enormous leverage over Ottawa every single year. Every year, uncertainty continues unless all three countries reach new agreement. That uncertainty is why Canada is moving so aggressively on infrastructure. Now, if COSMA collapses, Canada needs alternative markets ready and fully operational. The Gateway Strategy is the insurance policy against the worst KSMA outcome. But here's what most analysts are missing in current coverage today. Canada does not need KSMA to expire for this pivot to matter. Even if KSMA renews, diversification makes Canada stronger at the negotiating table. A Canada with Pacific capacity is a far more confident negotiating partner. A Canada with Asian energy buyers plays a much stronger hand entirely. This is the economic doctrine Mark Carney has been building since January. And the numbers backing that doctrine are striking when laid out clearly. Canada's Indo-Pacific trade already totals roughly $257 billion annually. That figure comes from 2023 merchandise data and has grown since then, $257 billion to a region most Canadians barely think about. Japan is Canada's second largest single country export destination after the United States. China represents Canada's third largest trading partner in total merchandise trade. South Korea, India, and ASEAN nations all grow faster than American demand. Canada's Indo-Pacific strategy, launched in 2022, set the foundation for all this. That strategy committed $2.3 billion over 5 years exactly. The Gateway Strategy is the infrastructure backbone of that 2022 strategic vision. Words on paper in 2022 are becoming steel and concrete in Delta. Now look at what this means for Canadian workers beyond the port. The Roberts Bank Terminal 2 project alone supports 17,000 operational jobs, but the construction phase creates thousands more jobs across British Columbia directly. Flatiron Dados, Van Ord, Ain, and Carlson all bring major workforce commitments. Rail upgrades connected to the port create additional jobs across multiple provinces. Prairie farmers benefit when grain moves faster and cheaper to Asian buyers. BC forestry workers gain when lumber ships reliably to Japanese construction markets. Ontario manufacturers gain when diversified routes reduce their single customer vulnerability directly. This is the economic multiplier a major port expansion genuinely delivers. It compounds as trade relationships deepen and total shipping volumes steadily grow. By the mid-2030s, when RBT2 is fully operational, that compounding becomes visible. The Port of Vancouver is already Canada's most cargoverse port by far. It handles grain, coal, potash, containers, automobiles, and bulk liquids daily. Adding 50% more containers transforms it into a Tier 1 global port. Compare that to Asia's largest ports, and the ambition becomes very clear. Shanghai handles roughly 47 million TEUs every single year of operation. Singapore handles 37 million TEUs. Shenzhen handles over 30 million annually. Vancouver currently handles about 3.6 million TEUs across all operations. RBT2 brings that figure to 5.1 million TEUs at capacity. Still smaller than Asia's giants, but competitive now on the Pacific lane. That competitiveness matters because Asian shipping companies choose ports on reliability. Faster approvals, modern berths, and expanded rail make Vancouver far more attractive. Every major shipping line adding Vancouver to its route is a win. More routes create competition. Competition drives costs down for Canadian exporters. Lower costs mean Canadian goods reach Asian consumers at more competitive prices. That price competitiveness determines whether Canadian exports actually grow or stagnate. Ottawa understands this logic chain. The gateway strategy reflects that understanding exactly. But one more layer to the story is being almost completely overlooked. The Building Canada Act enabling all of this is brand new legislation. It was designed specifically to fast track critical national economic infrastructure projects. RBT2 is the first real test of whether that new legislation delivers. If it works, Canada gains a powerful new tool for economic sovereignty. If it stalls, Carney's entire infrastructure first economic doctrine takes serious damage. That is why the October 1st pipeline decision matters enormously right now. It is the second major test of the same act months later. Two tests, two massive projects. Canada's economic doctrine rides on both outcomes. And those two outcomes define Canada's economic independence for a generation. Let us look hard at the risks because they are very real. The Building Canada Act is new. New legislation carries implementation uncertainty. Environmental groups have fought RBT2 for years over marine habitat concerns. The project sits directly adjacent to southern resident killer whale habitat. Those whales are endangered. Construction runs right through their sensitive seasons. Canada invested $258 million for specific whale protection measures. Conservation groups say that money does not offset the construction noise impact. Zawasan First Nation Chief Laura Cassidy raised concerns about treaty rights directly. She said benefits may be national, but impacts are felt locally instead. 27 First Nations consented, but the loudest voices remain cautious today. These obstacles cannot be bulldozed through with fast-track legislation alone ever. Trans Mountain proved ignoring local opposition creates devastating and costly delays. Canada's reconciliation credibility is on trial with every infrastructure decision made. Getting this right matters as much economically as getting it built quickly. Now, look at the competitive pressure behind all of this urgency. Today, the United States is not sitting still while Canada pivots toward Pacific. American West Coast ports, Seattle and Los Angeles, are actively expanding too. California's Port of Long Beach just completed a major container terminal upgrade. American rail networks connecting those ports to inland markets are being upgraded. If Canada moves slowly, Asian shipping lines simply choose American ports instead. The window to capture Pacific trade is real, but genuinely quite narrow. That is why fast-track designation matters so urgently for Canada. Now, every delay month is a month rival ports gain firm shipping commitments. Contracts signed in 2026 shape global trade flows straight through the 2040s. Here's the broader geopolitical picture tying this entire story together. Now, China, Japan, and South Korea actively court Canadian resource exports right now. Japan signed a major hydrogen cooperation framework with Canada in recent years. South Korea is one of Canada's fastest growing bilateral trade partners today. Canadian canola, lumber, and seafood still move into China in large quantities. India is the single fastest growing major economy anywhere in the entire world. Canada and India have spent years negotiating a pending free trade deal. A Pacific gateway makes Canada far more attractive to India as partner. More port capacity and faster throughput change that entire negotiation dynamic today. This is about capturing new relationships, not just protecting the old ones. Nations building infrastructure now lock in trade relationships for the next decade. Canada bets the gateway strategy puts it on history's right side now. Now zoom back to the numbers one final time before the conclusion. The Port of Vancouver moves 1 billion in goods every single day. Carney wants to double non-US exports by the year 2035 completely. Our BT2 alone adds $100 billion in entirely new annual trade. The Alberta pipeline opens access to Asian energy markets worth trillions long term. The Indo-Pacific represents 257 billion in annual Canadian trade. Rail upgrades, bulk expansion, and environmental pillars complete the four-part strategy. Every single number in this story points in the exact same direction away from Washington toward Tokyo, Seoul, Beijing, Mumbai, and Singapore instead. That directional shift is the biggest Canadian economic policy move in decades. Not since NAFTA have Canadian trade stakes been this genuinely high overall. Trump tariff pressure accidentally accelerated exactly this entire Pacific pivot outcome here. Every tariff threat pushed Canadian businesses to seriously reconsider their dependency. Every COSMA uncertainty pushed Ottawa to fund infrastructure it had long delayed. Every Washington threat made the Pacific pivot more politically viable domestically. Overall, Canada needed a reason to build what geography always made possible here. Trump gave Canada that reason loudly, repeatedly, without any real subtlety. Now Canada is acting, and the window is fully wide open today. The question every Canadian investor and business owner should ask is simple. Is your sector positioned to benefit from this Pacific pivot or not? In agriculture, the answer is almost certainly and straightforwardly a yes. In energy, the October pipeline decision changes your entire investment calculus. In manufacturing, the critical question is whether your supply chain actually adapts. In logistics, port and rail expansion creates very real near-term opportunity. Now, in finance, Canada's infrastructure investment cycle is just beginning its long run. Terra Marine has signed. The Major Projects Office is consulting communities. Now, October 1st is when the pipeline gets its national interest designation decided. Decisions made now echo through Canada's economy for the next 30 years, and that is not hyperbole. Tier 1 infrastructure historically does this to economies. Trans Mountain took years of pain but changed Western Canadian energy pricing. RBT2 takes until 2034, but effects begin the very moment it opens. Gateway strategy effects began the moment Ottawa publicly committed to this vision. Investor confidence and shipping line planning shift significantly on announcements alone. Terra Marine, named July 13th, sent a direct signal to global logistics firms. The Major Projects Office involvement signals genuine regulatory seriousness to investors. 27 First Nations consenting signals social license to all international partners. Each signal shifts how the world views Canada as a trade partner. Collectively, they show a Canada done being timid about its economic position. A Canada done letting geography be wasted by dependency on one neighbor. A Canada finally building toward its Pacific century with genuine real urgency. The $1 billion daily through Vancouver is just the opening number here. 100 billion in new capacity is what that daily number becomes. 257 billion Indo-Pacific trade is where this is heading. This is not about one port, one pipeline, or one deal alone. This is Canada deciding what economic power it genuinely wants to become. The Indo-Pacific is not a future opportunity. It is a present reality. Canada is choosing presence over dependency, and that choice changes everything now. The port is just the beginning. The real story is only starting. Subscribe to Money Signals and drop your comment below right now today. Do you think Canada's Pacific pivot can actually succeed against competition? Tell us what you think. We read every single comment left below. Hit that like button and share this with someone who needs it. This is the economic shift of a generation happening right now entirely.